Morning, folks. We'll be starting the webinar in a few minutes, just after the top of the hour. But welcome. We'll be back in a second. All right, folks, we're just waiting on some more people to stream into the webinar room. We'll be getting started here shortly. But find the Q&A tool in the Zoom webinar software, and feel free to put in any question at all that you like. We'll be answering those as we go along, but also at the end there'll be a short a Q&A as well, where I'll answer any questions I haven't addressed throughout the call. I'll just do a quick sound check. Can somebody just type into the Q&A tool to verify you can hear me? That'd be great. All right, thank you, William. Okay, well, let's get into it. We've still got people coming in, but that's okay. So I'm Ken, and today we're going to be talking about AI agents. So it's going to be some slides, but theory, and then we'll go into some sort of a practical demonstration of some of these concepts. We'll be using our platform Sapience to demonstrate sort of the generic concepts that we're discussing today. But Oh, sorry, I was just looking at the poll results here. Bear with me 1 second. Um, and yeah, so you can sort of think of this as, general enterprise agent theory that you can apply in your workplace and applies to any agent framework. And then the practical examples we'll be showing you in Sapience, our tool. But some of those concepts you can, portable, and you can take to other platforms as well. Okay, so I like this slide because, in the world of AI at the moment, there's a big disconnect between what CEOs and boards and ownership and investors are saying in private and in board meetings versus what they're saying in public. That's starting to change a little bit, but it's mostly still true that there's a big disconnect between those sort of private thoughts and the public commentary. The best way to know what CEOs and boards are thinking and planning is to look at their actions and look at what's actually happening in the market. So here's a smattering of screenshots from the Wall Street Journal over the last 12 months. And, we're seeing these sort of steady drumbeats of RIFs or reductions in force at big companies and happening in big numbers. All right, so at Microsoft last year, they had 2 back-to-back press releases where they announced, across 2 press releases, 35,000 engineers lost their jobs. And in another press release, a third one, they boasted that 30% of Microsoft's code is now being written by AI. And those 2 things are, of course, correlated. And that, Microsoft only, unlike, whereas Google's an advertising business who happens to do some technology, Amazon's a logistics business that happens to do some technology, Microsoft is a pure play software company. They write code and sell code. So the fact that agents are now doing 30% of their core business is worth paying attention to, given that they're on any given day, second or third most valuable company on earth. A recent headline was that Jack Dorsey, one of the co-founders of Twitter, now runs Block, formerly known as Square, announced to the market that he was replacing 40% of his headcount with AI agents, and his stock price immediately jumped 30%. Now, that's important because every other public company CEO tracked that stock price movement, and CEOs track almost nothing as closely as stock price movement. So you can be assured that we're going to see this steady drumbeat of sort of AI-enabled layoffs happening in big companies and small companies, and that drumbeat's going to get faster and louder as time goes on. Another interesting headline was Mark Benioff coming out and talking about how Salesforce rolled out agents in their technical support group, in their CS group, and lowered their costs by 17%. What he didn't go on to say is that represents thousands of jobs and hundreds of millions of dollars worth of savings for Salesforce. Now, as a Salesforce shareholder, I love that, right? Because Salesforce is sort of a beast of a product, and so AI agents can actually do better customer support. It's good for revenue, and it's also good for the bottom line. It represents enormous savings for them as a company. But let's unpack the belief set that's driving these actions and these behaviors. And I say belief set because it's beliefs that drive behavior. You don't actually have to agree with what's on this slide, but you should understand it, right? And so we're just contrasting a purely human workforce with an agentic workforce. And now, the workforces of today and tomorrow are very much hybrid workforces. They're part human, they're part AI agent. And in this compare and contrast, we're sort of pretending like you can have a pure AI workforce, which isn't the case, but these are the beliefs. Humans work a maximum of 40 hours a week, 48 weeks a year. So you get roughly 1,900 hours of labor from an employee. It doesn't matter if that's a senior employee or junior, though that logic holds. An AI agent, by contrast, works 168 hours in a week, which is 24 times 7, if you're wondering. And that same agent will work 52 weeks a year. So 8,736 hours in a year. So 4.5 times as much labor that you get from an AI agent. Remembering that the agent costs perhaps 5 or 10% as much in a dollar perspective as the human. So if a human knowledge worker costs 200,000 fully loaded, AI agent might cost 20,000 over the same period of time and work 4 times as many hours. With humans, those 40 hours are not all equal. right? Humans work at varying levels of productivity. Maybe, sort of there are peaks and troughs, and maybe 5, 6, 8 hours, if you're really lucky with your employees, of those hours are at peak productivity. Whereas with AI agents, it's just consistent quality the whole way through. If you've set it up properly, you're using the right AI model, you get consistently great output, 168 hours a week. Humans come with drama. They come with words like overtime or sick leave. AI agents do not. And, AI agents, if you set them up properly, do exactly what you want them to do, which is also not true of humans. Humans are prone to errors and can often be a liability. Now, AI agents make errors as well, but so long as you then correct the agent and write the rule down, so don't do this again, the right approach is this instead, the agent will never make that mistake a lot. So you only have to correct an AI agent once. And then point 4 on the agents chart here is really important. With humans, if you've got a terrific employee, and I've got some terrific employees, I can't clone Regin or Brian or Pao and have 50 or 100 of them. I can hire slowly and train, and over time I can build a good human workforce, but that takes time. With an AI agent, if I've got one great AI agent that's performing its job brilliantly, I can click a button and have 100 of those working in parallel, right? Because at the end of the day, agents are software. And so everything we know about software, good and bad, applies to AI agents. Point number 5, this one's near and dear to my heart. I've employed thousands of people over my career, fired hundreds. Great employees are not born, great employees are not hired. You make great employees. You hire for talent, and then you train them, you develop them. And often when you get an employee great, they'll leave you, right? So my previous software company, for scale, I had 200 engineers. And I had I had terrific employee retention. I was very proud of that. But I always had an issue that my stars would get poached by Google or Amazon or sort of other big mega techs. And with AI agents, that never happens. If you get an AI agent good, you own that. That's now an intellectual property asset, scalable and saleable. And so that point number 5 is sort of critical for the owners and senior leaders in the audience. And there are some over here, I recognize some names, that even if, say, you're a services business where historically you've never really considered yourself an IP business, when you start building great AI agents, you actually start morphing into being an IP-based business, right? Because you've now got these scalable, saleable assets in the form of AI agents. So let's take a step back and let's actually define what is an AI agent, right? If ChatGPT is your frame of reference, that is not what we're here to talk about today. We're talking about sort of hardcore enterprise AI that can reason, plan, and act, that can carry out work over long time horizons, hours, and even days. So imagine, if you would, I'll use ChatGPT because lots of people are familiar with it, but imagine you had a version of ChatGPT that knew everything about you, had access to all of your files, knew everything about sort of Ken the person, right? My health stuff, my work life, my home life, everything. But it also understands everything about my business, knows everything that's in my ERP, everything in my CRM, knows every interaction I've ever had with my customers. Then, in addition to all of that, from a knowledge perspective, it can do work. So anything that can be carried out at a desk, computer work, can now be done by an AI agent. That's what we're here to talk about today. And that is not science fiction. That technology is available right now. Sapience is one platform that can do that. And so, like anything in life, there are good agents and bad agents. ChatGPT is actually a version of a bad agent, right? It hallucinates, which is a friendly word for lies to you. It can't source information and proprietary data, right? Your company's data, doesn't know anything about you as a human. It's got broad general knowledge, so it's a bit like a child that's memorized Wikipedia, but you wouldn't put a child that's memorized Wikipedia into your business and have them work for you, and same thing applies to consumer AI chat like ChatGPT. Can't collaborate well with humans or agents, got no concept of teams or groups, generally a jack of all trades and master of none. So ChatGPT, Claude in a browser, anything built on Copilot sort of fits this heuristic bad AI agent. A good AI agent has these 13 properties. So they won't hallucinate. They always cite data and sources for every single claim that they make, and they understand that it's just a claim, not a fact. They're task specific and a master of that. So you might have a data analyst agent who is just a master of analyzing data in Excel and does that better than any given human. Good agents are faster and cheaper and often better than the equivalent human solution. You can scale them vertically. We talked about that. Good agents collaborate well with humans, right? So human in a loop, escalate to humans, reach out to other humans. They can orchestrate other pieces of technology, so they can literally read an Excel file or edit it, query a database, send an email, work well with other agents, right? In a world where we have many humans and many agents on a team, the agents need to be able to work with humans and also other agents. Can reason, plan, and then act. And this is sort of maybe a key difference between consumer AI chat, where it's very transactional. Get what's on at the movies, or find me flights to London. An agent has a goal, understands the context it's working in and that goal, builds a plan to execute towards that goal, and then gets to work, which is a very different flow. Can maintain those goals over long horizons, escalates and asks for help when stuck, can work autonomously. So there are other platforms out there on Earth that can do all 13 of these things. Sapience, our system, does all 13 of these. Claude Code in a Harness does about 8 of these. OpenAI Codex does about 7 of these. So it is not true that if you've got something on Copilot or you've got ChatGPT Enterprise that you're actually getting good enterprise agentic AI. Now, when I talk about knowledge and we talk about, say, 20 million words or 50,000 pages, it's hard to wrap your head around what that is. But a good AI agent will start to drift at about 50,000 pages. But let's have a look at what that looks like, right? I'm a big guy, I'm 6 foot tall. If we were to print out 50,000 pages back and front and then stack them in a pile, it would be 6 meters tall. So taller than 3 of me stacked vertically. Right? Now that's one AI agent. So I might have an AI agent that is my customer agent, knows every single interaction that my business, my entire company's ever had with my customers. I might have another one, a financial agent that knows, it's got access to all of my financial data from the last 5 years, every statement, every working paper that went into those financial statements, as an example. And this is, here we're talking about proprietary information. We're not talking about the things that an AI agent knows inherently, right? So when an AI model is released, you've heard of things like GPT 5.4 or Codex, let's go to Anthropic land, say Opus 4.7. These models have built into their weights, they're called, an incredible amount of information. Everything that's in Wikipedia, basically everything that's on the public internet at this point, good and bad. And so an enterprise AI agent inherits all of that stuff, right, that's built into the model. Here we're talking about what we can supplement it with on top of that awesome knowledge store. And also, just like humans, AI agents work better in teams. So we had a client using Sapience, and there was a pretty simple request, right? Write me a report on sustainable excellence practices for my business, covering customer engagement, innovation, and best practices. And the work product it produced was astonishing enough that we went and did a deep dive on how it did it. So it produced 30 pages of research, best practices, checklists. It aggregated information from 50,000 different customers that they'd had across 1 million data points. And when I asked the humans involved how long it would have taken them to create such a report, the answer was weeks at a computer. But the real answer was never, right? When I probed deeper, I was like, okay, so would you have done that previously? The answer was absolutely not, because they would have lost money on doing it, right? They got about $10,000 for this piece of work, would have been way more than that in labor to do it the manual way. And under the hood, Sapience had fired up 6 different agents that had worked together in a swarm and worked for about an hour to deliver this piece of work. So this is I'm trying to sort of fill in this picture for you of what enterprise AI looks like, and it's not ChatGPT. Although I am curious, right? So let me ask the audience a question. You can use the Q&A tool to answer me. What are you using? What's your day-to-day go-to tool? Is it ChatGPT? Is it Claude? Is it Copilot at work? Is it Perplexity? What are you using? Now, whenever there's new technology, people reach for metaphor to try and explain it, right? So Sundar Pichai, CEO of Google, had this to say: AI is one of the most important things humanity is working on. It's more profound than, I don't know, electricity or fire. Well, if you excise the I don't know from the quote, which makes him sound nowhere near as smart as he truly is, what he's saying there is pretty staggering, right? He's a smart guy. He's running one of the three biggest AI companies on earth, Google, and electricity and fire each change the trajectory of the human species and this planet that we live on. I like data, so I then sort of turn to, all right, what are some other technologies that have reshaped the earth? And here's one particular chart we can look at. So in this case, we're looking at consumer tech, and we can see here how long it took technology to reach 100 million users. So in the case of streaming consumer video, Netflix took 10 years, right? Short form multicast chat, Twitter, 3 years, 4 years. ChatGPT took 7 days to get to 100 million users. Now, if we keep going down that thought vector, let's look at how long it took various technologies to get to 1 billion users. And so here are 4 pillars of the modern, sort of technology world. And each of these technologies, in their turn, changed the world. But each of these technologies took decades to reach 1 billion users. So personal computers from 1981 to 1 billion took 20 years. Cell phones, 30 years. The internet from DARPANET in the early 70s to 1 billion users, 35 years. Cloud computing, 15 years. AI took 6 months to get to 1 billion users, right? So we've never, ever seen anything even remotely close to AI in terms of adoption and speed of change. And that by itself is momentous, right? Because we humans don't do so well when things change fast. You'll remember when the internet exploded in the 90s, that led to the dot-com crash, as an example. But AI is also not incremental technology, and this is important. If you think about each of these technologies above, they were pretty much incremental, right? With a cell phone, I could already, like I'm in Sydney. If my friend was in New York, I could still talk to them before the cell phone. I could pick up a landline. The cell phone let me do it in my car or while I'm going for a walk, but that's an incremental innovation. AI is not like that. AI represents step changes up in what we can do with a computer. And those step changes are not happening yearly. Those step changes, they were happening quarterly, they're now happening monthly. Every month now, the major AI labs releases a new model that is a step change up in capability. It's almost scary, and this is my full-time gig, keeping up with all of it. But both the speed of change and the scope of change is absolutely astonishing. There's a comment here, it's absolutely mind-blowing, we're all screwed. William, we don't all have to be screwed. We're going to get to why we don't have to be screwed here shortly. So the metaphor I reach for when I explain AI is not any of those above, and it's not fire or electricity. It's motor vehicle technology. And a lot of people don't think about motor vehicles as technology. But go back 100 and so years, and absolutely was, right? Fields were ploughed by horse and oxen drawn ploughs, and so that was sort of agriculture, and getting around involved the horse and buggy. Fast forward to today, we all drive cars. Driving a car is part of being an adult. We have a license, we study, we use it in our personal lives, get our kids to school, we use it to drive to work. But that whole journey to get to where we are now with, 2.5, what is it, 1.5 cars per family? I think it probably depends upon the market. That took a very, very long time from the original innovation. The original innovation that drives cars, pun intended, is the internal combustion engine, which was first sold in 1860, right? So that was the initial innovation. And when it released, it was a bit of a yawn moment. Nothing changed, right? It wasn't until 1908 when Henry Ford created the Model T that consumers at least paid attention, like, aha, okay, now with this harness around this novel innovation, I can see this is transformative. And so, that then has led to the modern era of motor vehicles. There are 285 registered motor vehicles in America. It's $11 trillion if you were to value that dollar-wise. Oil's a precious commodity because of this. We fight wars because of this. But none of this is the business story. And everyone at this webinar here is in commerce in some way, shape, or form. You're mostly senior executives. The business story that starts with the internal combustion engine and fast forwards today is trucking. So today, 71% of goods by economic value move on trucks. People are surprised by that, but it's by far has by far the majority of sort of dollar value of goods that move. Because of trucking, goods are cheap, the economy hums, and we have sort of this circle, this positive circle that goes on. But trucking didn't take off until 1956. Why is that? Because for business to adopt motor vehicle technology, there were other technologies required, other enabling technologies. So 1956 happened, two really important things happened that year. In America, the Highways Act was passed. They decided to pave America with concrete and create the US interstate. Similar things happened in Europe, post-war reconstruction. But vitally also, in 1956, there was a bit of technology released called the shipping container. And it was standardized shipping containers that allowed all these different modalities of transport to interconnect that led to an explosion of trucking. Fleet operators emerged, and goods became cheap to move. So now let's go over to AI land. The novel innovation in AI is not ChatGPT or Claude or any of these things. It's the transformer model. So GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. It's a form of neural network. We've had neural networks in computers since the 70s. The theory of neural networks has been around for 200 years. But what was novel and innovative was the transformer architecture. And that was actually invented by Google, funnily enough, in 2017, given away to the world in an academic paper. Full attention is all you need. Now, fast forward to November 2022, and it wasn't Henry Ford harnessing the tech. It was two fellas, Sam Altman and Dario Amodi. People don't realize this, but Dario Amodi, who now runs Anthropic, he was running research and product at OpenAI in November 2022. He built ChatGPT. So he's now running Claude, and on many metrics, he's beating Sam at his own game. But Dario actually created ChatGPT. And we know what happened, right? November 2022, ChatGPT's released. Within 6 months, there are 1 billion users of consumer AI chat. And so that's the equivalent of the family sedan, right? Going back to my previous metaphor that, excuse me, but it's not the business story, right? The business story, the truck equivalent, is AI agents. And that has not swept the world yet, but it is starting to. And that's what we're really here to talk about today. And just like physical trucks required other enabling technologies to take off, so too did AI agents. And all of that stuff had to happen. So there was this big gap between November 2022 and where we are here now, almost to the middle of 2026. But the enabling technologies are here, the Mack trucks are here, they're enterprise agents. And in this new economy, the precious thing that makes it all hum is not gasoline, it's not petroleum products, it's data, right? And so here is Dario Amodi, creator of ChatGPT and now Anthropic and Claude. Of all the people in AI you should listen to, he is number one, right? You're here, you're listening to me, that's cool. But the guy you should really pay attention to is Dario Amodi. And he has this to say: AI could wipe out half of all entry white-collar jobs and spike unemployment to 10 to 20% in the next 1 to 5 years. Most of them are unaware that this is about to happen, sounds crazy, and people just don't believe it. Well, he's right. You should believe it. And we're gonna explore why in the next few slides. So let's look at how knowledge workers work, okay? So here's Joe in the middle. Joe is, a mid-level executive, maybe a junior partner at a law firm or an accounting firm, or, a consultant at a marketing agency. Pick your poison. But Joe has got lots of experience in training. He's got advanced degrees. So he's expensive. He costs his business about $200,000 a year. He's not client-facing. He isn't adored by his team. And he is in a lot of trouble. You may not know it. If we look at what Joe does in a 40-hour week, and we zoom out and we think about employment, right? The 40-hour work week, it's been around since about the 1920s, about 100 years. And what happens there? A human, Joe, or any employee, sells 40 hours of work or 40 units of work to the buyer, his employer. It's a transaction. A lot of employees think it's an entitlement, that they're entitled to jobs. They're not, right? That's a weird fiction that emerged in like the last 50 years, and it's about to be completely destroyed. Joe sells 40 units of work to his customer, his employer. But let's look at how Joe currently spends that time, or more importantly, let's look at how the hours that are bought by his company are spent, right? Joe prepares presentations like this one. He sends and responds emails. He analyzes data in Excel. He does research with proprietary information. He does research on the internet. Holds meetings and conversations with other humans, and he writes plans and programs of work to mobilize teams of humans. Well, with today's AI agents, at least half of that can be done by today's agents better than Joe can do it, right? So slides, AI just can do vastly better presentations than humans can. Same with sort of analyzing data in Excel. I mean, a good data analysis agent can do better Excel work than 99% of humans. Email agents can analyze and triage email. They can do research that is just well beyond what any normal human can do, and on and on. So the net result is that the company who's buying 40 units of work per week off Joe, in other words, his employer, doesn't need 40 units of work from Joe anymore. Only needs 20 using today's technology. And remember that AI today is the worst it will ever be. It's improving every month. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that Joe is out of a job. But if there are 20 Joes working at this company, that company doesn't need 20 Joes anymore, right? That company now only needs 10 Joes. And as the ratio, continues to transition to what the AI agents can do better than humans, that ratio continues to change over time as well. There's a comment here, AI made this slide deck. It actually didn't, but it probably would have done a better job. This one was done by hand. And so I don't know what you see when you look at this slide. I put this up at conferences. It's fun to hear what the audience says. But on the left, I see Joe, right? A human worker doing things by hand at a computer, all right? And on the right, I see an agentified executive. Now, of course, this is agriculture before automobiles and agriculture after automobiles. And this was part of the Industrial Revolution, where millions and millions of jobs disappeared, at least a 5-to-1 culling through the introduction of machinery into both factories and farms. And of course, it was the agricultural businesses that adopted motor vehicle technology that flew ahead in the market and did much better, sort of mechanized agribusinesses. Same thing is happening with AI agents right now. The professionals who are using AI agents are 5 times more productive than their competitors who are still using horse-drawn plows. And so let's turn to the industry I know best, computer coding, because it's a vignette for what I think is going to happen in every single industry where every knowledge worker category, right? Anything you can do it at a keyboard and at a computer. So the latest AI coding models, so that's Codex 5.3 from OpenAI, and that's Opus 4.7 now from Anthropic. They write better code and tests and PIDs and every artifact in the software engineering value chain. They're better than 99% of human coders. This slide says 95%. I sandbag a little, but it's just, there is no comparison. And I'm somebody who's employed a very large number of software engineers over my career. That's what I've done my whole career. And we simply just don't need those programmers anymore. We do not need any juniors or graduates. We don't need any intermediates. We do need architects and seniors. We still need We still need engineers who've managed big teams of humans, and we need engineers who've designed and architected massive software systems, but that's about it. When it comes to cutting code, writing tests, validating code, doing security review, like all of the things that take up most of the time, those things are all now better done by AI coding models. And this has massive implications for the Earth. There are, depending on who you listen to, 27 million paid programming jobs on this planet. And, for example, let's take the economy of India. It is massively influenced by programmers and IT workers, right? So what happens on Earth when 90% of those jobs are no longer needed? I don't know. It's above my pay grade. What I do know, though, is that the same approach can be taken to most work that's done at a computer. The reason that coding was done first is that the AI labs themselves are software shops. An AI model is code, it's software. So they're dogfooding their own product, right? And each of the two, so in this case, I'm talking about Anthropic and OpenAI, they each announced that their most recent model was mainly built by the previous generation's model, right? So they're building coding tools around AI models, which are code. Those AI coding models are now building the next generation of AI coding models. That's why we're seeing the progress go vertical, right? Because code's writing code. The AI is building the AI. But the exact same approach applies to every knowledge work category. And if you're thinking right now that AI can't do your job, because your job is, way too hard for AI to do, I want to tell you about this study that was done between the New England Journal of Medicine, who very much said, AI can't do what doctors do, and Microsoft. And so the New England Journal of Medicine compiled 304 of the most impossible diagnostic cases, right? So incredibly difficult pathological disease. And if you haven't seen the TV show House, it's this great show with Hugh Laurie as the star where, it's a bunch of diagnosticians and there's a patient and they always crack the case. It's actually modeled on the Sherlock Holmes story. But of course, in real life, that's not true, right? So in this A/B test or this red-blue sort of study, the blue team were the human doctors. And these were senior medicos from Harvard, Johns Hopkins, Mayo. And they got the diagnosis right 20% of the time, 1 in 5. Not like the TV show. And the team of AI agents, which was sort of architected in a team or a swarm, like we were looking at earlier, and it was given the exact same data and tools that the humans were, the same data and diagnostic tests. The team of agents got the diagnosis right 85.5% of the time. And that's not even the headline here. This was with GPT-4 based technology. This study was done 2 years ago, right, using old AI tech. And so it's, to me, so powerful because it's one of the most important things we can do as knowledge workers. It's life or death. It's diagnosing disease. And yet a team of AI agents architected properly using old technology crushed the humans. And so there's another study that's come out, which is based on my preferred benchmark. There are various ways of measuring AI model and agentic systems, but there's one measure which looks at how well an agentic system performs economically valuable work. So in the legal industry, that might be, say, contract review. In architecture, it would be reviewing plans for compliance with code, and go on and on and on. And so the blue here in this slide shows where agentic AI matches, sort of elite senior human practitioners in those fields. The red, on the other hand, shows where AI is currently being used. So if we go to my field, computer software, the AI models are now, you can see the blue, it's almost at the top, right? So it outperforms 95% of humans. And yet adoption is still less than 40%. And depending on which industry you look at here, it's vastly lower. So let's look at legal. This is showing that AI can outperform about 90% of lawyers, but the adoption is only sitting at about 20%. And so this, as over time, you're going to see the blue bar get bigger, right? So more things will be subject to being AIified or handled by agentic systems. But far more importantly, we're going to see those red bars shoot up. And so this slide either represents opportunity or risk, depending upon who you are. For me and anybody who's like an early adopter of agentic AI, it represents opportunity, because we're going to see sort of this tidal wave of adoption in the next 10 years as legal goes from 20 to 30 to 40 to 50, etc. For those who don't adopt AI, it's not those of you who are on this call, it represents huge risk. Companies and careers are just going to be destroyed and fast by this wave of technology that's coming, because I've consumed far too many legal hours in my life for comfort, right? I've been involved in all sorts of litigation as a CEO. I've been involved in, sort of legal work in my personal life. I was divorced, and I would pay my lawyers for the worst lawyer. I was paying them sort of $400 an hour, up to senior partners where I'm paying $1,500 per hour. Per hour. Now, who am I going to work with? The law firm that charges me, okay, yeah, $1,000 an hour maybe for a senior partner, and then the rest of the work's done by AI? Or am I going to work with the law firm that does everything by hand? I'm going to vote with my wallet, and I'm going to work with the law firm that is using agentic AI, right? Who's driving a tractor instead of pulling a plow. And so market forces are what is going to drive this, and the buying public is what's going to drive this. And we're just going to see massive disruption in industry after industry. But you'll note there are certain industries here where AI is useless, right? Grounds maintenance. I'm fond of saying that AI can't touch grass, and I was saying that before this study came out. That so there's some things that AI can't do. It's why my common refrain is, if you can do it at a computer, right? So if you can do it at a computer, AI is fast taking it over. In the interest of time, I'm just going to go 2 more slides. So now let's go back to what are CEOs and boards really thinking and planning and not saying in public. And this slide is it. And this slide is a simplified version of a real workbook that my consulting business uses with boards and CEOs. Right? So this is not BS, this is real. And note the box in blue at the top, if cost saving is your goal. Not all companies are just focused on cost saving. Right? Big companies generally are. Small companies might look at AI and say, cool, I'm going to double or triple the productivity of my middle managers, and then I'm going to serve twice as many customers, right? I've got more demand than I'm currently servicing, so I'm going to step up into that demand. At big companies, on the other hand, demand's pretty much static. They're already servicing it, and cost cutting is the goal. Now, weak AI practitioners, which is the majority, 90%, I would say, of AI experts out there are full of it. They'll tell you that you should focus at the bottom of the spreadsheet. So focus on the junior staffers, and that's absolutely wrong. What we've modeled here is a professional services business. It's loosely modeled on a real company, and we've taken every employee from the top to the bottom. So the CEO's up here. There's one of them, costs $800,000, fully loaded, base bonus benefits. All the way down to the junior burgers, right? There's 50 of them, so that must include part-time and sort of casual workers, and they're $25,000 a piece. Now, the junior staffers represent 68% of the headcount, but only 18% of the cost. Let's go and look at the Joes, though. So the mid-level professional, the junior partner, right, the senior consultant. This business has 20 people of that rank. They cost $200,000 per year. And so that rank is only 27% of the heads, but it's 58% of the costs on a dollar basis. And remember also that we are not talking about creating agentic systems that can do 100% of Joe's job. We don't need to. If the system can do 50% of Joe's job, I don't need 20 of these anymore. I need 10 of these people. If the system can do 80% of Joe's job, well, now I only need, say, 3 or 4 people in this role managing the outputs and the quality of the sort of the agent swarms that they're managing. And so that's really what we mean by hybrid and agentic workforces. A few senior humans, and I really do mean a few senior humans, managing the output of swarms of AI agents that are task specific and are way, way better at the thing that they do than any naked human is. And so that brings us to Sapience. I'll just pause, have a look at the Q&A. So if you've got questions, please do ask them. Got a comment here that says, I'm a med school dropout and I can tell you that ChatGPT is far superior to my family doctor in every single way. Yeah, I believe that. We've got some people using Copilot. We've got some other people using Claude. Okay, all right. So we don't have any specific questions there for me to answer, but that's okay. So what I'm going to do next is I'm actually going to flip across to my browser, and we're going to look at Sapience, which is our AI platform. Now, if you have a use case in your mind, if there's something that you want to know about, yeah, how could I use agents to do X? Please share that, and I'll customize what I'm showing here to that case study, right? Otherwise, I'm just going to do a bit of a generic demo. So this is Sapience, which is our AI platform, and there's a few things to know. Well, actually, you know what? Best way to show you some of those things is, so I'm going to go to the Sapience website first, not because it's a cool website, but because it was built by Sapience, right? So Sapience built a website about itself, which I think is incredibly meta and pretty cool. So the first thing you know about Sapience is you get access to all the tech from all the major vendors. So, you hear that Claude Code's doing something cool, you get it in Sapience. You hear that OpenAI released a new model, it's amazing, you get it in Sapience. You've been reading about Mythos from Anthropic coming out, you'll get it in Sapience the day it's released. That's the first thing to know. Sapience is being used by companies big and small, governments, Fortune 500 companies, all the way down to sort of teams of 5. So it's a flexible platform. It's got security baked in from day zero, so it's secure by design. AI systems in general are a nightmare for CISOs or heads of security, but Sapience is not. It's actually a platform that they'll like. And then we get into agents. So Sapience is built all around agents that work 168 hours a week, right? They work while you sleep. And it comes with an enormous library of agents. This highlights a few of them. I've got a designer I can get help from, a data analyst, to the comment from the audience earlier. Yeah, my slides would look better if I used the Sapience designer agent. And that's no joke. They really would. There's a project agent. We all hate project management software. Sapience makes that a lot easier. And then there's an agent store. So you can install additional agents, right? It's an entire operating system is what it is. You can replace Dropbox and Google Drive with Sapience. You can happily throw tens of thousands of files at it. It's got a writing sort of word processor built in, so you can ditch whatever your current writing tool is, whether that's for quick notes like Notion or Evernote, or actually writing, sort of production grade docs. And then this sort of last point is it integrates with 200 different systems. So whatever you're using in your business, whether that's Oracle or SAP or Salesforce or you name it, there's a very good chance we already have an integration for it. So here I am in Sapience, and when you first log into Sapience, you see this, right? It's a little welcome tour that takes you through some of those things I'm saying. So the pillars of Sapience are agents, and think of these as digital employees, notes, which is the writing tool, files, which is the cloud file storage, and then projects, which is project management software. It's a joy to use for a change. But let's go and have a look at agents. So, I can have a voice conversation with Sapience. That doesn't lend itself well to a webinar, but that's a fantastic tool. But if I just go to, well, actually, I'll pause here. Immediately contrast this to something like ChatGPT, right? Where ChatGPT or Perplexity or the others just give you a chat box. Sapience is a bit more complex than that, but far more powerful. So you can see here that I've got chats, I've got documents, I've got projects, and I've got files. I'm just going to fire up a chat. And so the first thing I have to do is pick an employee I want to work with, right? That's the way to think of agents. I'm going to choose a digital employee that I want help with. Now, we've talked about the slide thing, and I'm not great with slides, so I'm going to pull up the design and creative agent. We have a question here about I'm in Australia. Who's selling this for you in Canada? Yes, I am in Australia, but we're a global company. We've got staff in America, so that would be the closest to Canada. We don't have any staff in Canada, but we've got Sapience customers all around the world, including Fortune 500 American companies. We've got some very big American customers. Now I know if you're from Canada, I know that Canada and America are different, although it's all North America. I lived in the States for 20 years. So, but let's go here. So I want this agent to build some slides for me, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say to it, can you search the web for information about Mythos, Anthropic's new AI model that hasn't been released yet? I'm doing a live demo, right, of your ability to research things and then create nice slides. And you'll notice down here skills. So good AI systems will give you this sort of concept of skills. They'll also let you toggle, the thinking modality. So when you're working with an agent, you sort of almost got like a smartness toggle, right? I can dial it up to being as smart as possible. It's then going to be slower and more expensive, but whatever. And then skills are sort of ways that I can steer its behavior. So you can see here I could work with HubSpot if I wanted to. I don't. Here I want slide output, right? So I equip the slide output skill and says, right, instructs the agent to create great slides. Okay, so I'm going to fire that off. And what we'll see here in short order is first, so right now what it's doing is it's actually establishing that internal goal that we were talking about before. So it's going to reason, plan, and act. And now it's already gone into execution mode. So it's getting help from the web research agent. So it's calling a friend, right? It's engaging another agent. So right now we're actually working with two AI agents, but I didn't have to tell it to do that. It's smart enough to figure it out itself. Oh, wow, it's already got me results. That was fast. Okay, cool. Slides. Anthropic's most powerful AI model. Step change in intelligence. How Mythos was discovered. Yep. There was a leaked blog post. Yep. Capybara was its internal name. What can it do? Better coding than anyone. Cybersecurity. It's found a crazy number of bugs in existing software, which is pretty scary, actually. Risks in deployment, blah, blah, blah. Controlled layout, controlled rollout. Yep. So big companies are using it right now to patch their software. Okay, cool. So it now tells me where it got its data from, right? So again, a good AI agent always grounds its claims in fact. And the fact is that there's a web page on Fortune's website that has some information, and TechCrunch and some other things, right? It doesn't mean the website's true, but Sapience is very careful about telling you, where it got its information from, and most systems won't do that. Now I could save that to a PowerPoint file if I wanted to. I could edit those slides if I wanted to. That's very useful if I just want to tweak a few things. But this is interesting. Publish as a website. Now, anybody who's ever been involved in creating and hosting a website knows that getting a nice site built is half the problem. The other half of the problem is getting a domain, figuring out how to host it, figuring out how to publish. It's a nightmare. So I'm just going to say, yes, publish as a website. We'll see what it gives me. Now, going back to the comment earlier about were my slides AI created, you can see here that the slides that it's done, and I haven't, I didn't iterate on it. I could easily iterate with it to get these slides different and better, but they're already as good as, if not better than, some of the slides I was showing earlier, which I created by hand. But when I say I created by hand, I did the content. I sent it to my designer. He iterated, sent it back. We went back and forth. That was days of labor that went into that, right? It might have only been 3 or 4 hours of my time, but it was, 2-3 days worth of work for my designer. if I'm still working, if instead I'd been using Sapience, I would have been, that whole workflow would have gone from, let's call it 25 hours of collective labor down to maybe one, right? So I mentioned earlier a 5-to-1 reduction in labor between the horse-drawn plow and the tractor plowing fields. But with AI, it's way more than 5-to-1, right? In this example, it really is. It's 25 hours down to maybe 1 hour. All right, so it says it's done all of that and it's published it. Okay, cool. So let's go and have a look. Okay, cool. So it's now built a website. This is now a publicly available URL. So, it's taken away all the pain that normally goes into creating and hosting a website. It's even wired up. You can't see what I'm doing, but I'm actually hitting the arrow key. So it's wired up left to right animations between the slides. Amazing. So if this was a presentation for a client, I could now take the URL, send it, whatever you like. Now, that would have added another 5 to 10 hours to my previous labor analysis, right? Because now it's not just me and the web designer. Now it's also some IT guy who had to get involved to help me publish that as a website on the internet. That's sort of just one little example. Come in here. I used Gamma to do a slide deck for me last week in an hour that would have taken me a week personally, with 20 years experience in banking and private equity, making slides myself. Perfect example, William. Okay, so you're banking in private equity. I was a private equity CEO for 7 years and then a partner in a big private equity firm for 4. I've done a lot of M&A. I'm the same, right? I've got a huge amount of knowledge in my head. Me creating slides is this painful experience of working with a designer, going back and forth and trying to, sort of distill my knowledge into a deck. And here I can just do it and iterate so incredibly quickly. And you mentioned Gamma. I'm glad you did. Gamma is a product that just does slides. With Sapience, this is just one of the 30 agents it comes with and just one of the skills, right? So that's an important point for the audience, for me to say to the audience. I'm now pitching Sapience particularly as opposed to agentic AI in general. But because I've got access to all of these different agents, if what I want to do is do incredibly in-depth data analysis, I can use the data analyst agent. We were just doing slides, so I was using one of the marketing agents. If you need to go deep on healthcare, there's an incredible medical research agent. If you're in the legal sector, there's an incredible legal research agent. So with Sapience, you really do sort of get a swarm of digital employees who are just waiting to work for you. And I'll give you an example of what the data analyst agent can do, if I can find it. Okay, so there's a client using Sapience, and this was that million data set I was talking about. It's about 900,000 data points, representing 1,000 of their customers over years, about 10 years involved in this data set. And I got a guy called Brian on my team. He's a data scientist, data engineer, and a visualizations guy, amazing at visualizations. And he had, over weeks and months, built a whole series of visualizations on this data set. I then gave it to Sapience and I asked it to create, to the data analyst agent, I asked it to create a 3D visualization around 3 vectors. Now, these vectors, direction and execution results, they were not in the data set, right? The agent had to do a whole bunch of analysis and aggregation, maths, to actually get these 3 vectors. And it gave me this, and it was a bit of a snooze fest. I was like, whatever. Not very attractive. And I showed it to the CEO of the business, and he was like, it'd be so cool if you could just sort of like drag the mouse and interact with it. And I did that live and discovered live that he had in fact built an interactive 3D model that I could zoom into, zoom out on, hover over an individual data point. He doesn't mind me showing this top one. It's their best performing customer ever. The customer doesn't mind either. They're very proud of this. So, and this took the agent about 10 minutes to build. And using this visualization, that a customer of ours has won a lot more work, but also using this data set and other sort of slices of it, they've learned more about their customers in the space of months than they ever had in decades previously. Now, I then asked Brian, the data engineer I was talking about earlier, how long would it take you to build that? Right. So if I said, do it the old way, like here's the data set, go and build me this 3D model. And Brian thought for a while, sort of long pause, and then his answer was, Ken, never. Like I just couldn't ever build that. Right. And that was a bit of an aha moment for me, because this was 6 months ago, right? This isn't even using the latest technology. Here's AI doing something that even a senior professional who works for me can't do. And then people often joke, oh, Brian's out of a job. The answer is no. Brian now uses the agent to do things that I can't do with it. And Brian's now working at a level that is maybe 5 times more valuable per hour of work performed than he was without Sapience, right? But the point holds. In most businesses, Brian would be out of a job. So in big companies, instead of having 10 Brians on the team, they'll have 1 Brian using tools like this. All right, so we're almost out of time, folks. I'll just answer the remaining questions on the line. So come in here with your background. Must be able to sell the hell out of this into financial institutions, law firms, etc. Nobody's doing a discounted cash flow model anymore. Yes, William. So the ability to use the data analyst agent in, say, the finance sector is extraordinary. My background in private equity, not banking, but your point holds. On the law firm side of things, yes, although the legal industry as a whole is pretty resistant to AI, we're starting to see the emergence of AI-enabled and AI-first law firms, and I think that's going to rip through the whole legal industry, because who wants to pay $500, $800, $1,000 an hour for a sort of a naked lawyer, unaugmented? That model's just going to die off. And we're going to see this change rip through every single industry. So I'm not sure what industry you're in. Feel free to get in touch with us and we can chat about ways we might be able to work together. And so actually that brings me to an important point. If you would like to learn more, if you would like to get access to Sapience, you can probably the easiest thing is to email us. Let me get the email address up on screen for you. Oh. Hang on, Zoom is not cooperating with me. Okay. All right, so at the bottom of this screen, you'll see my email address. Feel free to just shoot me a note to ken.shaw@sapienscloud.ai. I'll also put it in the chat, and feel free to reach out. We love talking to anybody who's sort of AI curious, anybody who's in the industry. Like we do these webinars mainly as like a public good, to try and educate executives and owners and CEOs about what is coming. But if you'd like to reach out, if you'd like to try out Sapience, if you'd like to talk to us or me or my team, that's the email address to use. It should now be in the webinar chat. Otherwise, that brings us to the end of today's presentation. Thanks for dialing in. I hope it's been valuable. We hope to talk to you in the future or see you at another webinar. And otherwise, I'll say good morning still from Sydney, Australia. And to those of you in the States, good evening. Those of you in other parts of Asia, I guess it's still morning there too. And those of you in Europe, go to bed. All right. Thank you.